Welcome to the Enduring Minds podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I'm one of your hosts, Evan Birch, and I'll be joined shortly by Jason Bahamundi today. Enduring Minds is where we explore the intersection of mental health and endurance sports, while breaking the silence surrounding men's mental health alongside the societal expectations and norms that discourage men from seeking help. We're here to have real, open, honest, and vulnerable conversations, creating a supportive space to share the struggles, victories, and everything in between that shapes who we are. So leave the shame, guilt, and fear at the door and join us for another episode of Enduring Minds. If you're new here, we are on our 11th guest episode. All previous episodes are on the Run, Try, Bike YouTube channel and on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts, alongside 8 other incredible shows. Please subscribe, rate, review, and leave a comment, as that helps us grow the podcast and be able to tell more incredible stories. And I would like to bring Jason onto the show. Let's get into it, Jason.
Let's get into it. All right. This first time, so we're episode 11. I finally got to the point where I'm not uber nervous. And maybe it's because we chatted with Kevin in the back room and he laughs a lot, which makes me feel calm.
Yeah, I think we're in like the 1% of podcasts now because we're over 10 episodes. Nailed it.
We made it.
Yeah, not stopping. Well, as I said, let's get into it. We're excited to be joined by Stuart Crowe. Kevin is an endurance athlete, impact leader, and founder of an organization called Give a Mile. From the brutal cold of the Yukon Montane Arctic Ultra to the grueling miles of the Arizona Monster 300, Kevin has pushed his body to extraordinary limits, but it's his inner journey that truly defines him. After being diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia, otherwise commonly known as the suicide disease, Kevin was forced to reevaluate everything, and what emerged was a powerful exploration of mental health, mortality, and meaning. His nonprofit Give a Mile has helped thousands connect with dying loved ones through donated flights, transforming personal adversity into global compassion. Kevin's story is one of grit, heart, and the healing that comes when you decide to live wide open. Kevin, welcome to Enduring Minds.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have a conversation with you today. You've had what most people would say a big year already, and it's only June 1st.
Yeah.
So we're excited to get into some of those things, as well as Give a Mile and a little bit of your mental health story. So we're stoked that you're willing to share your vulnerability with us and be with us here today.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love what you're doing here, and I think it's so important to have these conversations. So look forward to having a great conversation with you guys.
I want to jump in here real quick, Evan, because you gave a phenomenal introduction. And I don't know Kevin from a hole in the wall, and I'm getting ready to get to know him better. But Kevin, what you're doing is outstanding. And I wrote this question down. Do you think in today's world that there are more people like you who are willing to help others that we just don't know and we haven't met yet, or less?
Yeah, I would say there is. There's so many good people, so many good things going on. And I know one of the things in, the Give a Mile space and when I founded the organization, and we have people donate their unused travel miles, and we give these flights for mothers, fathers, sons, daughters to have a final visit. And it's been incredible. But I didn't know anything about charity. I didn't know anything about kind of travel miles. And so went on a journey kind of connecting to a bunch of people and, how the world works. Hey, I'm trying to build this charity. Do you know anybody? And I've connected to so many incredible people that are doing so many incredible things in the world, right? And it just gives me so much hope and so much optimism. I, for one, I don't watch the news. I've turned the news off. I just removed it from my life. I find it gives you limited value. I think some people have this kind of perception that maybe it keeps them connected to important things and that they can actually do something with that. I found the opposite. I found it was just kind of a lot of information that I had no kind of agency over, or I couldn't do anything. And if I wanted to find out something that was going on in the world, I wanted to do it in a deeper research type of thing versus maybe a couple minutes or a couple 30-second kind of sound bites. And so, you know, what you kind of put out there and look for and give focus and energy to, you find. And I think through the Give a Mile journey, I found a lot of incredible, you know, social entrepreneurs and people that are running charities that are just doing so much good work out there. So I'm an optimist on that for sure.
Yeah, I think Jason and I have talked about this a lot, that you start to attract the people that are in the realm and the space that you're moving towards, because it's all energy. And I think that's the cool thing about it, is that energy exchange that you get when you're around those people that just light you up and want you, like, put you in the place to want to do more and want to be more for yourself, your family, your coworkers, your friends, everybody. And I can relate to the news part. Having worked emergency services for 20 years, I was the news. I was the one who was creating the news on a daily basis. So to watch it afterwards, I'd be like, well, I took the call and did the thing and heard about it and did all the other things. I don't need to watch it. So I don't think I've watched the news in probably 15 years. It's been a long time. So I kind of want to get into, let's do some of the endurance sports stuff first, because it's kind of top of the mind. You're still recovering from it as we've had conversations. You've really run through some of the harshest conditions on earth, the Yukon desert heat. How do those external extremes compare to the internal terrain that you've had to navigate with the diagnosis, as well as just like other things that you have going on in your life? You have a family. So I'd love to hear how that kind of plays into one another.
Yeah, it's a great question, you know, and what I would say, and I think one of the things that has drawn me to these big ultra events and, you know, running, you know, 300 milers and 400 milers, people always, you know, they tend to focus on the physical element of these races, but to me, it's inner work, right? Like, it's just like a long inner meditation. And you really, you know, the biggest journey, I think the biggest obstacles are that mind, right? The stories it's telling you, the things that are going on. And so to me, you know, I look at, you know, let's look at the Yukon, which, you know, is up north. It was February, you know, the average temperature was -40. And there's a huge element like self-support, where you're pulling your own pulk, you have all your supplies on it. Rescue maybe 20 hours, maybe 24 hours, somebody to get to you, right? So very much this kind of solo adventure, and you feel kind of like you're almost on the moon in some ways. And so to me, the biggest part of that kind of inner journey and that inner dialogue was around fear and dealing with fear, and really talking to fear. You know, is one of the epiphanies I had on the Yukon was, you know, a lot of people will say like, oh, you know, kind of push fear away or kind of deny it's there, or like, I have no fear. I couldn't do that, right? I really ended up in this conversation with fear, and it was really trying to make a friend with it. It was about like, well, what am I scared? Why are you scared? Like, what are you scared about? Oh, I'm scared about freezing to death. Well, you got all these warm clothes, right? It's in your pulk. You can pull those out. Or, you know, you survived last night and you were fine and you slept in your bivvy and you got through it. And so we're going to be fine again. And it was really kind of having this relationship with it. And then, you know, ran the Arizona 300 miler 6 weeks later, and obviously lots of heat there. I think it was actually some record heat for that time of year. And, you know, once again, fear pops up, and it was like, well, what are you scared of? Oh, dehydration, right? Heat stroke. Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to drink, we're going to eat. We're going to make sure we take care of ourselves. And one of the big things I think about this inner work on these big ultras is that it is so applicable to your life, right? It's metaphorical learning. And you think about like, life is going to do hard things to you that are outside of your control, right? I started Give a Mile because I lost an incredible friend to brain cancer and spent the last year of life with them. And anyone who's dealt with brain cancer, it's like the person you love is evaporating in front of your life, right? And so that was forced on you. You have no choice, and so you have to rise to the occasion. And then you have this arena you can go into, and you can force hard things on yourself to build those muscles, right? Because I believe all these things are muscles, right? Like, how do you become more courageous? Is you expose yourself to places where you have to be courageous, right? And you become stronger. How do you become a better long distance runner? Is you run more long distance, you build those muscles. And so to me, when I look at those external journeys, there really were about building the muscles to deal with life, to deal, when I got trigeminal neuralgia, which is a crazy disease that basically is shocks in your brain, right? So I was having, 15 seizures a day. People describe it, or doctors describe it, as the most painful chronic pain condition you have. When I ended up in that situation, it was all the same mental approaches and mental strategies that I'd used getting through big ultra events, right? So
I wrote down the word perspective with a question mark because as you were talking, that's what I was gathering. And then I wrote down two other things. You avoid the news. And then I wrote, does he avoid social media? Because in order to gain perspective, I think you have to have the ability to be introspective. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on how you've been able to gain perspective, such as, what are you afraid of? It's minus 40 degrees. You have this clothing.
Yeah.
What are you afraid of? It's 110 degrees. You have this ability to cool down. Like, how did you gain that perspective, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things when I think about perspective, the thing that automatically comes to mind is give them out, right? And so working with people that are dying. And the organization's bigger than this now, but when we first started, I would basically talk to every family that we gave a flight to. And I have a job. My Give Them All is a passion project, right? It's a volunteer thing for me. And I have a day job, and I'd get calls from families, and during the day I'd end up talking to them, and I'd be, very focused on my work problems, and I work for a tech company, and what tech was doing or not doing for me, and all those good kind of things. And then you talk to a family that maybe has a 6-year-old child that's dying from cancer, and they're just trying to get the grandparents there, or you have a family that's trying to heal. Like, I haven't talked to my brother in 10 years. I need him to be flown here because I need to apologize to him, and this is the thing I want to do before I die. And those perspectives were so important to me. And I think, one, they snap you out of maybe some of the problems that you're putting all this energy into and you're building them into. I call them like paper dragons, right? Like, oh my God, I remember I had this client that owed us a lot of money and wasn't paying, and I lost so much sleep over it. I got so stressed about it, and then talked to a family in this situation. It was like, you know what? We'll deal with the money. We'll figure that out. So I think that was just so valuable, right? That these families are giving you these different perspectives and helping you there. And you talk about things like social media. Like, am I on social media? Absolutely, I'm on social media. It's part of Give 'Em All. It's part of how we reach out to people. I do use it to share people the adventures and the stories, and to me it's like any tool. And I think it kind of goes back to that conversation, like, what you put out there you get. Really focusing on people with positive messages and people that are doing things that you're trying to do, like you're running these events or maybe putting a charity together, and getting them into your algorithm, to me, has been huge. Like, it's been so valuable for wisdom and for knowledge and for inspiration and for motivation, and just like, kind of filling that bank, right? Filling that bucket of that kind of stuff. And of course, there's a bunch of negativity, and you see things, and you don't give that energy, you don't give that attention, and you give the attention to the things that are really important for you to build, right? And I catch myself doom scrolling sometimes. I got to pull myself out of it, like anybody. But to me, social media has been a really valuable tool and a really uplifting tool around these things that I've pursued.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to go to Kevin's documentary release on May 2nd, and it was following him during the Yukon Montane Arctic Ultra and his unfortunate inability to finish due to his back, which we can get a little bit more into. But it was such a cool experience to see somebody go through something so harsh. And again, like, I just think about, I know Aiden with 2C Media that was with you the whole time, and his crew. And like, I know him, I've known him for a little bit. And like, to think that they were in it at the same time as you, but they could, like, you guys talked about not being able to, like, you can't accept help from them during something like that, it just blew my mind. So I know you're working on getting that out to kind of larger masses, however that looks. But when it does come out, I hope people get a chance to be able to see that as well too. So.
Yeah, it was a great experience, right? Like, I think that's the first time I've done the documentary thing. And, we went up to do the Yukon Montane Ultra. We were raising flights for Give a Mile. I wanted to raise 37 flights for families because my friend Ryan was 37 when he passed away. And that's the first time I kind of put those two worlds together. We had 8 in the documentary crew, and it was an incredible race. It was on a new course this year and never been done before. And as we, 640K self-supported, and I'm talking like, I think there were stretches of 200 kilometers before you could get resupplied with food and that type of thing. And, it became quite obvious. And the first night, it got down to somewhere close to minus 50. And I remember like going to turn my Garmin on to send messages back and forth, right? And it just said, "Hey, too cold, won't function," was the message on the device. And I think about 40 to 50% of the people DNF that first night. Lots of frostbite. I think 12 people ended up going to the hospital. I think there was a couple of helicopter evacuations because the frostbite was so bad. And as that race was going on, it was becoming apparent that more people were dropping out. And I remember getting to a checkpoint and saying, like, "Is there anybody here? Like, is anybody sleeping?" You weren't allowed to sleep inside the tents. You had to set up your own tent type of thing. And they're like, "Hey, there's only like 7 of you left in the race," or something like that, right? So this kind of last person standing type of mentality and battling through that. And I got to a place where, I couldn't walk. My back was cramping and ended up having to pull out of that race, which was really emotional because of, we had Give a Mile tied in, we had the documentary crew, we had lots of people following. And, I remember just like the pit in my stomach of not being able to actually execute on that race. But when I got back to a place where there was some internet and we talked about social media, to see all the love and praise that came in was incredible. It was just lifted my spirits. People have been following that race, right, with the live tracker, and they had seen the temperatures, they had seen what was going on. And here, I was dealing with this since I had let these people down and I'd let the sponsors down and the donors, and it was the opposite. So many people just weighed in of like how inspired they were to see pushing through those conditions, and how inspired they were of like following the race, and they had their kids following the race. And so it's such an interesting perspective, because I said, if I had said to people like I was going to go do 300 kilometers and got to the finish line, it was successful, right? But because it was 640, there was this line way out there of 640 that I had to put in my mind as the only way that success could happen in that race. And yet it happened in many ways just because of the journey that people came for. So yeah, I can't wait for people to see the documentary. We've submitted it into some film fest, etc. We're waiting to hear back from them before we can distribute it, but we'll definitely let people know when it's out.
Yeah, I think it's such an incredible story, so I can't wait for people to see that. I know it was very well done, especially considering the conditions and the equipment, and it was incredible.
Yeah.
And I think all of the three of us here understand endurance sports, and I think we know that it's not necessarily the outcome, and it's who we become during it.
Yeah,
that really is what we're all after, and that may be lost on some people, right? But
yeah.
I mean, when your body betrays you or like threatens to, like, how does that reshape your relationship with like effort, identity, control, not just with the Yukon Ultra, but also the diagnosis of the trigeminal neuralgia?
Yeah.
What does that do to you?
Yeah, if you go back to TN, right, and to give people's perspective, I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk. Even walking downstairs, I had a seizure. I ended up in the hospital for 8 days in a chronic pain condition because I couldn't eat or drink water. So I'd lost like 20 pounds. And the seizures, like, it's like somebody took an electrical shocker and put it into your brain, right? Like the pain is just incredible. And I heard somebody describe it best. It's like you're living in your house where somebody will jump out at any time and beat the living shit out of you 20 times a day, right? You don't know what's going to come, right? So the mental fatigue and wear of that was incredible. And I thought my life was over, right? I just thought, like, there's not really there's some medication, some surgeries, but it's just not a good situation, right? And so Unfortunately, trigeminal neuralgia is commonly called the suicide disease because people take their own lives that have it because of the pain. It's made eligible in Canada, right? So assisted death if you have it. So you're in this deep, dark hole. And it's just like, okay, what does this mean to me? And, one of the biggest things I struggled with is, I had run ultras before this, and I had been in the military, and I felt like my body didn't betray me, right? Like I felt like when I called upon it, like I had never had a DNF before that, right? Like when I called upon my body, it could do incredible things, and that it hadn't really been pushed to a place where it had stopped, right? And it had given up on me. I also felt a little bit like the universe gave me like a little kind of grin and kind of winked at me, right? That it was taking care of me. Like I had this kind of special aura around me from the universe that these things weren't going to happen to me, And I remember when my friend Ryan was passing away from brain cancer, he would ask me a lot of times, like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And, the eventual answer he came to was, well, why not? This is human experience, right? This is part of, a lot of humans end up with brain cancer. Why did I think I was above it? Like, this is just part of being a human. This happens to us. And when I was dealing with Tien and I was in that hospital bed, and I really, like, at parts of that journey, I was like, praying to die, right? Because it was just so painful and so bad. And I was like, how can my body have done this to me? How can this have let me down? But I know from Ryan's journey and a lot of things he taught me, and also I'd say the ultra adventures, was like, you got to write your own story, right? Like you gotta find the story in this, and you got to find your journey out of it. And I remember saying to my friend when he came to see me in that bed, I said, I am going to write the best comeback story you've ever heard, right? And so that wasn't necessarily like for the world, right? I'm not talking about like, there's incredible comeback stories in the world that are probably bigger than mine. But that was my story that I was going to tell myself. And that's a story that I believed in and put my energy into, right? That I was going to get out of this hospital bed and I was going to go run the coldest, hardest ultra in the world, in the Yukon Montane Ultra. And it was going to be an incredible comeback story. And so that was the narrative and the thing I built and leaned on when I felt like this body had failed. The universe had kind of failed me, right? How was I going to get out of that dark place? Was really leaning into that story.
I'm kind of laughing a little bit because there's so many questions that are running through my brain right now, trying to figure out one of them to ask. But the question I want to ask is, go back to perspective a little bit. You just described going through this diagnosis, your buddy Ryan, and being on his deathbed. And I had originally wrote the question down: how do you reset from a DNF to starting the next race 6 weeks later at the Arizona?
Yeah.
And I presume you kind of answered that question for me, but I still want to put it in your lap to actually answer it. How do you reset mentally? The body will take care of itself, right? In 6 weeks. So, but how do you reset mentally so that when you get at that start line, you're thinking about finishing and not thinking about what if?
Yeah. And, it's really interesting because when I came back from the Yukon, I was so emotionally exhausted, right? Like I told people, like, I've never been that emotionally exhausted and just had no energy, right? Like to your point, like I started running again and working out, and I kind of had this debate: was I going to take a big rest period and start working out, or was I going to, dive back into it? And so after about 4 days, sorting my back out and stuff, I'm like, I'm going to go back and get back on my training program and do big days and big mileage and get back after this thing. But the emotion, the energy, I was really struggling with. And I really believe we are the stories we tell ourselves, right? And so the story that I built and the thing that I built the energy around was a narrative was I owe people miles, right? I owe people miles because I didn't get the Yukon finished. And I didn't really tell a lot of people I was going to do the Arizona 300, right? Like it wasn't part of the documentary. It wasn't part of the story. It was something me and my friend had committed to. We were like, if that Arizona 300 ever comes, because we had run the Moab 240, we're going to go run that. And so the timing was like 6 weeks. Okay, we're going to go do this. And I had a couple other friends that had committed to do that race. So we had a group of people going down. But I was like, the story is I owe people miles, and I want to be a person that does what they said they're going to do and executes on their commitments or promises. And so go down and get the Arizona 300 done, right? Like this is kind of the redemption arc, or the way to pay those people back that donated to Give a Mile, that supported the cause, that helped you get 37 flights out. And so that became kind of the mantra and the rally cry. And trust me, there was a lot of doubts. There was a few times I almost called my friends and said, like, I don't think I can get down to Arizona. This isn't going to work, right? Like, I just can't get rehabbed quick enough. But I also know one of the biggest mental tools that I've learned through ultras, and I would say Ryan's journey and TN especially, was just chunk it down, right? Like, why are you from now to the finish line? Like, it's really about now to what you're working out this morning, or now until like the 10 minutes that you're trying to run right now, or the hill you're trying to get up to. And if you have to chunk it down even smaller, chunk it down even smaller. I had this moment in the Moab 240, had a similar issue. I was probably like 80 miles to go and massive back cramps, and was literally taking like 3 steps and falling over and sitting on the ground. And, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to wait until the time DNF, right? I'll keep doing 1 or 2 steps, and eventually someone will come and the sweepers will come and the race will be over. But I'm like, well, if you can do 2 steps, do 5 steps. Okay, do 5 steps, I can do 20 steps. Okay, if I can do 20 steps, let's just walk for 2 minutes. Okay, if we can walk for 2 minutes, let's walk for 10 minutes. If we can walk for 10 minutes, let's run for 2 minutes, walk for 2 minutes. And eventually got myself out of there into the finish line. And it was all about chunking it down to the smallest activity that I could find my mental energy to execute on, right?
Do you think having the reaction from the sponsors and your family and friends after the DNF also helped set the tone for going into the Arizona Monster, where we build these things up? And I'll give you a quick story. So when I did Cocodona in the inaugural year, and I was going up Lane Mountain, I was taking 2 or 3 steps and then having to sit down on a rock because it was so hot, it was so hard. And running through my brain was, how do I tell all these people that came out here for pacing and crewing that, look, I didn't make it to mile 37 and the day is over. I know you were planning on a week, and the family and friends and the people that were following, I eventually got through it and finished the race, but I've had other DNFs, but we still build these things up, and we still put amounts of pressure on ourselves. So was it sort of like a pressure cooker, right? When you pull the valve and the steam releases, and the sponsors were like, Kevin, we're here for you, and family and friends we're here for you, that sort of alleviates a little bit of that pressure, or was your mind still in that frame of, I've got to get this done because I owe them miles?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several things I'll comment on that, right? So one of the things about the Yukon is only 3 people ended up getting to the finish line on foot this year, right? And I made it the 5th farthest of the people on by foot. So that felt good to my ego, right? That felt good to kind of my result, and kind of, I think, allowed me to kind of come to terms or peace with the effort that was put out there, right? But inside of that, I think hearing from people, and sometimes when you're in those moments of low points, that it's more important how people see you and believe in you than you believe in yourself, right? Because same thing kind of happened in TN when I was like, hey man, like this thing's over. I don't know what's going to happen to me. And people are like, oh no, Kev, I know who you are. You'll get out of the bed. You'll get through this, right? And I'm in my head, I'm like, like, what are you talking about? Like, I have like TN, it's called the suicide disease. Dude, I'm not going to get out of bed. I don't even know if I'm ever going to be able to just walk down the block again. And they're like, no, I know who you are. You'll find a way through this, right? And I feel like that's a bit of a North Star, right? That pulled me through that. And even, when the Yukon and you didn't get to the finish line and, had the result I had, people were just like, no, man, we believe in you. We know what you're trying to do. Like, if you didn't get to the finish line, we know how hard it had to be, right? Like, we saw you sacrifice. We know what you had to do. And there's this concept of cookie jars David Goggins talks about, and I've kind of expanded on, right? That there's these mental places that you reach into for energy and maybe inspiration. And, that there's a one of like, there's people that don't think I can do this, and that chip on your shoulder and that energy of like, being fired up by that. And I would say in the early journey of my ultras, that was like a cookie jar I used a lot, right? And maybe a narrative I would tell myself of like, these people think you can't do it and you're going to prove them wrong. But the second cookie jar is the people that are cheering you on and believe in you and have your back. And like, at home or watching the tracker. And to me, that cookie jar, I reach in a fair amount. I would say maybe not as much as some other cookie jars I'll tell you about, right? One of those cookie jars is I've been here before. I've got through this. I figured it out. I'll find a way, right? I've done it. I've been in these dark places before. That cookie jar, I would say I tend to use maybe the most. But there's another cookie jar that has really built up for me over the last few years, especially post TN. And that is, this is an incredible moment. Like, you're only going to have so many races left. You're going to only have so many times you're out on a course like this. You're going to, you'll be back in the office soon enough, right? You're in this beautiful wilderness. Like, when's the next time I'm going to be up in the Yukon? I don't know. When's the next time I'm going to be up in the Yukon that far up, that's that remote, right? When's the next time I'm going to be on the Arizona trail, right? Like, there's only so many of these times. So this feeling of kind of just being present and enjoying the moment and experiencing the moment and just like enjoying it for what it is and not trying to rush it away or go somewhere else mentally has become a huge cookie jar for me in the last few races, and one that I feel like just makes those races so much more precious to me and so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, I think that speaks to what I tell my athletes that I coach is like, be where your feet are.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
you chose to be here in this moment, in this space. Like, you can either hate it or you can find those moments that are like the reason. And again, you can go back to the why when you came in, because I mean, we all know as endurance athletes, your brain doesn't function after a certain point. Like, you are basically a drunk squirrel on the trail.
Yes. Yeah.
And you need those people, your crew and your other, whether it be aid station people, to help you, because you physically don't have the capacity to be able to make like proper decisions. And that's where, again, like finding those little moments and like latching onto them is super important. And I mean, you've covered like hundreds of miles in solitude. Like, you've done some of these bigger 200s. The one question that I really want to know, because it's something that I don't think people don't put themselves into these places very often. Not many people, of this discomfort and this hard that we're choosing. In those really quiet moments, what's the most honest thing you've said to yourself where there's literally like nowhere else left to hide? Like, you're out there by yourself alone with your own thoughts, doing something so incredibly hard. Like, what is the most honest thing you've said to yourself in that moment?
Oh, there's been lots of those moments. I would say, just kind of thinking through a few of them is, I would say, and maybe recently in the Yukon, because of the level of risk and the level of danger, is, what do you have to prove? Like, why are you doing this? What do you have to prove, right? Because, the risk of death and danger up there was real, very legitimate, right? And, I got a beautiful family back here, right? I got incredible people around me. And it's like, just this honest of like, what do you have to prove, right? And then from that was kind of, what's going to be enough, right? Like, what's going to be enough out here? Like, do you have to get yourself killed to prove something? Like, is that what we're doing out here, right? And I used to do a lot of mountaineering. I had a big mountaineering accident in 1995 down the north face from Mount Robson, where we were left for dead for a few days, and a helicopter rescue, and ended up in a hospital, etc. And it's like, are we going back there? Like, is this what it's about? It's like pushing it so far to the edge that we're going to end up there where you should have died and you didn't die. And like, are we repeating a pattern of this? Like, what is this about, right? And so, finding that balance. And when I came back, I wrote this article. I post on LinkedIn Mondays. I try to share whatever wisdom I can. And I post the story of really around Moby Dick, right? The great white whale, and how, Captain Ahab gets obsessed with chasing the whale, and gets so obsessed with chasing the whale that he basically destroys his crew, right? Most of his crew died. The ship is destroyed. And, whatever the white whale represents in your life, like there's this borderline between obsession, right? That can obviously lead to destruction. And then this journey of spiritual growth and inner work. And, if you look at, the main narrator of Moby Dick, he's much more on the journey for self-exploration and like learning about the world and like the power of nature and the power of God and kind of coming to terms with that versus this destructive force of obsession. And that is what I was really wrestling with in that deep, dark, true, honest conversation out in the Yukon.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with Lori, my wife, this past weekend about death.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have said, not even maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was afraid of dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm no longer afraid of dying because I've been able to find things over the last 3 to 4 years that have filled my cup to the brim.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a large part of that fear was regret. I haven't done this yet. I haven't done that.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the Captain Ahab white whale obsession to destruction path. It's more of, I feel like I'm in a really good place.
Mm-hmm.
And if something should befall me right now, I'm okay with it. And that doesn't mean I'm going to take risks and jump out of planes without parachutes. Right. But we started this show based on men's mental health and the idea of mental health being not just go to therapy and have a therapist tell you, you know, do A, B, and C, but developing strengths and understanding your weaknesses. Have you been able to come to grips with certain things in your life that, you know, just a number of years ago, or maybe when you were young, you hadn't come to grip, you weren't capable of coming to grips with, but being in the Yukon, being in Arizona, Give a Mile, like all of these different components have allowed you to reshape your mental health around things that you once were fearful of.
Yeah. And I also say, like, just exploring your narratives and your stories, right? Like, I think one of the most valuable gifts, like so many valuable gifts from these ultras and these big endurance sports, but you know, when you are that solo that long, you're only in your head, right? And you know, people are like, and I know you guys probably the same thing. People are like, do you listen to music? I'm like, you can't listen to music for 4 days in a row. People, like, eventually, right? Like, eventually, you're just left with your thoughts and your mind. And you know, one of the things I think that was really powerful for me was becoming the observer of the observer, right? Because while I was running and I was doing these endurance things, I would find these stories, right? These stories that I was telling myself, this narrative, and kind of be able to catch it and interrupt it. And you know, we talked about those buckets, right, and the cookie jars and reaching into them. And you know, when I first started endurance events, that first bucket was a lot of like, I'm going to prove to these people, right? Like, these people don't think I can do it. I came from a very working class background, right? My dad was an auto worker. My mom was a hairdresser. The plants were closing. It was a Rust Belt, right? Like that was being taken away from us. We were struggling. We were fighting through that. I came from a family that had injustice done to it. My uncle was murdered. The person that murdered him walked out of court, right? Our family had no justice. So I had this narrative of this, like, the world is against you, right? Like, and it was like, my parents, you know, they were into the world, like, the man is against you, the man's putting you down, and you know, you got to go fight for what's you deserve in the world because they're not going to give it to you. And like, so I had a lot of that story inside of me, right? And I believe in that story. I was given that energy, a lot of energy to that story, and it doesn't give you peace, right? It doesn't give you peace, right? Like, you know, you battle the world a lot. And I remember when Ryan was dying from brain cancer, and he wasn't a religious guy, but we had this incredible, you know, spiritual counselor who was a young guy at the time, and would have these great conversations with Ryan. And you know, as Ryan was going through that, and you hear this a lot, right? When people get diagnosed with cancer, he was like, we're going to fight this, and we're going to battle, and we're going to win, and blah, blah, blah. And the spiritual care provider said, you know, the word I never hear you use is peace. Why don't you use the word peace ever? And it was just this profound epiphany for me. And I think about like the ultra races, and it was a battle, and I was going to prove to the world, right? Versus finding this place of peace and flow and tranquility. And you know, one of the things I refer to ultra racing. I'm not a religious person, but I refer to it as my church, right? Like that's a place where I go and have spiritual growth, and you're challenged with these things. And to me, I blew up that narrative, and I don't. We're all maybe a little bit of our habits are hard to break, right? So there's a little bit of that. The world is against me, or you got to go fight for what you earn. But I'm in much more of a peaceful place because of the ability to become the observer of the observer, and understand that narrative when it shows up and interject into that narrative, right?
I don't have a question for you, but I am going to be the observer of the observer right now.
Yeah.
And I notice in our conversation that there is a complete sense of calm over you and how you talk and what you present. And there isn't this idea of the rah, go tackle this, go tackle that. And I appreciate that. In a world where it feels like the loudest person gets the most attention, the way you talk about the things that you have gone through in life, your friend, the questions you've asked of yourself in those hard moments has not been spun into, and here's 7 steps on how you can do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I just think that that's super, it's really cool that you've been able to let us be a part of your world without yelling at us, in all honesty. Evan, I'll just turn it back to you. I just want to, as I'm listening here, I feel this sense of calmness as you talk.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I really appreciate that. Thanks for that comment. Yeah. I would say, one of the really important things I've learned through working with people that are dying, right? And we're like, our culture is so scared of death. Like people don't even like to talk about it, right? Like it's rude to bring it up. And a lot of people will say to me, like, I wouldn't know what to say to someone who's dying. Like, what do you say? I don't know how to talk to them. And the thing I keep saying, and the thing I've learned is, you don't have to say anything. You just have to listen. Right. That's the important thing is being there for people and listening and paying witness. And, one of the most valuable lessons I learned, especially, the last year of Ryan's life and just being beside him and paying witness and learning to listen. I talked about him asking the question why this was happening to him. The first part of that journey, I kept trying to lean in there and give him the right answers. And to your point, like, hey, the 7 steps of how to die properly or whatever it is, right? Like, I read this book, and what I realized is, first off, he didn't really care what I was telling him, right? Because it was meaningless to him. He was in this inward journey of trying to figure it out himself. And what he just wanted was somebody there to listen and bounce ideas off and get to his own answer. And his own answer, like I said, was, well, why not me? This is part of the human experience. It happens to millions of people. Why did I think I was above that? And so it's been a really important part of the journey, and a really valuable lesson that the dying has taught me is being able to sit in space and just be comfortable and be at peace with it, and not feel like you have to have all the right answers, or, have the 7 steps to kind of get to the right answer, or hack it, right? We love to talk about the hacks, right? How do you hack? How do you hack an ultra? Well, you can't. I'll tell you that right now. There is no hack.
And I mean, as men, we're hardwired to problem solve.
Yeah.
I mean, all of our wives would definitely say that. I mean, it's actually harder to learn how to sit with people in the dark and just be with them than it is to just spout solutions off. And that's one thing that I figured out in my journey. And I mean, I want to come back to 2 things. So the first one being peace. And I know for me in my healing journey, and from PTSD, depression, anxiety, from years of working emergency services and dealing with the sickest of the sick, working air ambulance dispatch, you quickly realize that the pain that everybody else is going through that you're experiencing, like you start to take all that on, and you quickly realize like the cost that I had to acquire my peace now has been immense. So that is not something that I'm ever going to give up again, is that like peaceful state, because it's like I had to work so hard to get there. And I'm sure everybody can relate to that in their own way, one way or another, with their own story. I want to come back to the observer of the observer again. And I've said this before when I've been out racing. People are like, what are you thinking about? And like, we talk about flow state and all these other things. And there's lots of definitions of flow state where, you lose sense of time and like where reality of where you are.
Yeah.
And for me, when people ask me, I'm like, I literally, there are moments where I can almost like be up in the sky, seeing myself running, doing the thing, but like being able to observe it from afar, which sounds like I'm not a spiritual person either.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe there's something, a higher power, whatever you want to call it, but to see it in that way and to be able to observe yourself in that way is such a powerful state, because it's like you have nowhere else other to be than to be present in that moment. You can't be anywhere else in that state. I don't know if you've experienced that, Kevin, but it's so hard to explain to people who haven't, again, put themselves into those really tough, hard situations, because I think that's the only time that really comes out.
Yeah, no, I absolutely have experienced it many times. It's such a powerful gift. I think one of the reasons why I keep coming back, right, to find that state. It's an incredible state. And, we just ran the Arizona 300, and one of my friends, it was his first big ultra, and he ran it and he had that state and he found it. And it was just such, like, I was so happy for him, right? Just an incredible gift, right? Just like, oh, you hit it, man. So yeah, it's an incredible thing. I remember I had this really powerful thing on the Yukon that I'll talk about too, is, you talk to yourself a lot, right? You're in your head talking to yourself around, like I said, I had conversations around fear and that type of thing. And I remember having this moment where I was kind of going to that flow state, and my head said, who are you talking to? It's only you. It's only, there's nothing else. There's not like a separation of mind and body. It's basically the way I can explain it to. You don't need to talk to me. We're just here, right? And I was just like, which is really hard to explain and put into words, but it was like the melting of mind and self together, where like that inner voice just kind of went quiet and just disappeared for a period of time, which I have I know some people might not have inner dialogue. I have inner dialogue constantly. So to have that gift was incredible. But these are the things that ultra races do for us. And I believe, putting yourself into hard things, that's the gift that you'll find for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a show that has ultra athletes, trail runners, but I think the idea of putting yourself into hard positions goes beyond sport as well. Like, you put yourself in a hard position to start a nonprofit, start a charity, right?
Yeah.
And you're asking yourself all these questions. What do I do? How do I do it? Where do I go? And I often say, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, I often say to people, like, take the risk and bet on yourself.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard. There's no doubt about it. I'm not diminishing the hard, but take the risk and bet on yourself. Do you have a mantra or a thought process that would sort of dovetail with that concept?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that it reminds me of. The Stockdale paradox. I don't know if you've heard or talked about this on previous episodes, but it's really around, Stockdale. I forget his first name. I think it was John Stockdale, was taken as a prisoner of war during Vietnam. His dad was a big high admiral, right? So, or was anyway somewhere in the military. So it was going to be a rough stint for him, right? And so what he would talk about is when he was in the prisoner of war camp, the people that thought, like, we're going to be home by Christmas, we're going to be home by Easter, were the people that ended up not making it. But the people that were pessimists, like, this is going to be terrible, didn't make it as well. It was the people that were realizing or coming to terms with the brutal truth and having a strong belief that they'd overcome it, right? Like, this is going to be hard, this is going to be brutal, but I will persevere and I'll find a way through it. And I use this example around when I first started doing ultras. I hated hills, right? I would be on a course and I'd be like, I can't believe there's another hill here. And oh my God, they said the elevation was only going to be 3,000 meters. It's actually 3,300 meters. I was just like, the way to get through this is just get good at running hills. And when hills come, you just meet the hill. Like no one's coming to pave it down. No one's going to get rid of it, right? So this Stockdale paradox of like, yes, this is going to be hard, but I will rise to the occasion and I'll make this happen. To me, has been a really important part of getting through, growing the charity and races, I'll say. The other thing is just the regret of not doing it, right? Like, I think, for all the hard obstacles I've had to overcome, and obviously, like, the one thing I want to talk about Give a Mile is, we have 1,000 applicants a year, and we give out 200 flights a year. So I let 800 people down a year, right? And like that's a fact, right? Like, so for some people I'm a hero, and for some people I'm not, right? You know?
Yeah, and it's not just 800 people. It's
Yes.
800 people who have dying wishes and their family and friends. Like there's a multiple to that
Absolutely.
100 as well.
Absolutely. And you know, nothing against those people in those emotional situations. Sometimes they send you emails that aren't very flattering, right? Like they'll tell you the brutalness of not getting a flight. And so to lean into that space, to me, there's a couple things. One is obviously, hey, there's 200 more flights that never would have existed, right? That's one of the things. But the fact to me of like, if I had never done this, if I had never leaned into this space and never saw what could happen here, I'd be sitting here with a whole bunch of what ifs, right? What if I had done that? Imagine, oh, we should have done that. We never. But once you take action and do something, you know the truth, right? You understand, right? Like if it's a viable idea, it's still going. We've done over 1,300 flights, over 60 million miles, right? We fought through all these obstacles, right? Going down the Arizona after 6 weeks of the Yukon, I knew what the brutal truth was. It's going to be binary, right? It's going to tell me if I can do it, yes or no. And to me, that's the really important thing about action. And I'm biased for action. I think I always tell people, if you know you're uncertain, if you don't know what's doing, just boil it down to the smallest action you can take and see what feedback you get from it. Because I just would rather do that than live with regrets of like the what if scenarios, you know.
I have one more question before we move into our final segment with Jason here. It's kind of been sitting right from the beginning, because right from the beginning when we first started talking, Kevin, like I felt a very strong rapport with you, just the way that I carry myself and the way you carry yourself. It seems to be very similar.
Yeah.
And, you know, June being Men's Mental Health Month, and legacy is this word that I've heard used a lot, mainly in like male centric, men centric circles.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that, you know, a legacy, like we often talk about leaving something behind, but I kind of think about it now as like, what if legacy is more about how we're showing up right now?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to know is like, how has your concept of legacy in everything that you're doing evolved to what it is today?
Yeah, you know, and I would say once again, like wisdom from working with the dying, right? Is that I don't really think too much about legacy because of the impermanence of life, right? Like just, you know, ask yourself a question like, do you know much about your great grandparents? Right? You don't, right? But you know their influence, through your family and obviously, you know, who you become as a person. And so I'm with you on the fact of it's like, what are you doing now with this time and this journey that you have? I you know, like we said, I'm not a religious person, but I believe that we've been given this gift. And it's, if I look around and I think about like the mental model of life, like if you woke up in a library or a gym, do you want to spend all your time talking about like, why am I in the gym? Why did I wake up in a library? Or it's pretty evident that the design of the world is about either growing or learning, or right, like everything around us to me is really around personal growth and this journey. And so to lean into that and to do well, and I have this mental model that somebody shared with me, and so if you're religious, you can use your religion on it. If you're not religious, just don't think of it as a religious exercise. But you know, you're at your end of your life, and now you got to go in front of a judge, right? It's a court, and you got to give them the evidence that you lived this life well and you did good things, right? And you got to do hard evidence, right? Because the default is, oh, I was a good person, I was nice, you know, whatever. And then probably the absence of things like I didn't go around murdering and stealing. So does that make me a good person? No. What's the evidence that you'd put to that judge, right? That's hard, that's definitive to say, look, I lived a good life. I had good impact on the life. That to me is quote unquote legacy. That's how I think about it, is like the moments I've had here, the moments I'm going to have, what is the impact that I'm creating on a day-to-day basis?
That's, yeah, super powerful. We're running out of time, and we do have a segment that revolves around the idea of misogi. I didn't hit the mute button fast enough. So we call this segment of the show Stop, Start, Continue. Like we said, it's based on the tradition of misogi, which is at its core about transformation, shedding old habits, beliefs, and ideas. and embracing and letting in a new and more powerful version of yourself while letting go and surrendering in order to grow. And throughout this conversation, I've heard different moments of that for you.
Mhm.
But we're going to put you on the spot. And
Yeah.
so this is the first one is stop. So if you had to choose one mental or emotional habit you want to leave behind this year, what would it be and why?
Yeah, one of the things I'm really working on is trying to stop talking to myself in a negative, deriding voice, right? That the motivator that's like, hey, you piece of shit, get going, right? Like, what are you doing, you lazy piece of shit? Get your ass going. And I'm really trying to get rid of that. Like at times, yes, it's been motivating. At times, yes, it's got me in motion. But using once again a kind of a mental frame of like, would you talk to your friend like that? Like, would you let somebody talk to your friend like that? No. And so I really want to stop doing that. I know it's hard. I think I've reduced it a lot, but that's my big stop for sure. Yeah.
That's an excellent one. I think we can probably all lean into that one.
Yeah.
From a start perspective, so you are going to commit to a radical mental shift this year that will force you to grow in new ways. What would that be and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a meditator. I meditate every morning, right? And I found it super valuable. I think it's right up there with kind of doing the ultras and the big distances of becoming the observer and seeing the narrative. But one of the things I want to really lean into in a daily practice is daily intention, right? So just started building it this week as like every morning after I meditate, sit for an extra few minutes and just really reflect on the daily intention of how to use this day, what I'm leaning into, what I really want to make sure gets accomplished with this day.
And the last one is the continue aspect. So if you had to symbolically cleanse or renew one aspect of your mental health in the next year, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I'm going to continue doing some big events, right? So it's interesting. I had a big year, as Evan said, and I told my family, nothing for a year. I want to get time back to them, and I owe them some time. Everybody, that trains like this knows how much you take away from your family when you're doing it. But after that year, I want to get back. And one of the things, I just turned 54. My birthday was just yesterday, and you realize, okay, how much time do I have? How many more adventures can I do? How many more items can I kind of pick on the bucket list and go actually obtain? And so, there's part of me and, hey, are we getting towards the end of this? Are we going to like wrap this up? And I was like, no, like there's important things, there's important lessons. And, I felt great after Arizona. Like I've got a few injuries I'm dealing with, but just emotionally rising up to that moment is like, there's more adventures to be had, and I'm going to go do that. I'm not going to base it just on an age and a calendar of numbers turning,
Adventure. I like it. So Kevin, we want to thank you for your vulnerability, your willingness to share pieces of your story with us today. Truly, like you come across as this old soul to me, and I love it because I've been told something similar. So it resonates very deeply with me. So do you have any final thoughts, any further words of wisdom, or another story you want to leave us with?
Well, I wanted to say a big thank you for you guys putting this together, because I think it's really important to have these conversations, especially around mental health. And the one thing I would say that I love about this and listening to your episodes is what I would call pragmatic mental health, like real tools, real advice that people can take and real experiences people can take. Because sometimes it can feel a little like, I don't know, philosophical or hard to understand. How do I really lean in and repair or strengthen my mental health? And I think the conversations you're having are going to give people incredible insights for them to do that. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That means a lot to us. Where can people connect with you and everything you're doing out in the world right now?
Yeah, for sure. So they can follow us at Give a Mile on Instagram, as well as on Facebook. You can follow myself, Kevin Stuart Crowe, Stuart, and that's Crowe with an E, on Instagram or TikTok. You'll see our adventures and you'll see what we're up to. We share flight stories and what we're doing with the charity, and we always love to have people help us get the word out, especially about Give a Mile. So yeah, follow us there.
Yeah, that's awesome, Kevin. Yeah, and if you're not able to donate miles, that's fine. Share is just as good. But if you're also able to donate miles, you got some of those sitting, reach out to Kevin and his team at Give a Mile. That's great. So on behalf of Jason and myself, we want to thank you for joining us on Enduring Minds. We are a proud part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, one of 9 incredible shows. Again, please subscribe, review, leave a comment, and rate the show, as it will continue to allow us to bring incredible guests like Kevin and their captivating stories to the Enduring Minds community. Until next time,